Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Football Club Chairman, The Hard Truth by Darren McAnthony. In episode 7, we're going to talk about, our favourite subject, coronavirus. I'm fucking sick to my stomach of talking about coronavirus, but it's what all of us, probably every household around the world right now, are talking about all the time. Going to talk about, really, is this a way to live? What's next? Going to talk about a family life. Going to talk about football and safety. Because obviously the ever-changing agenda every week is, first we wanted football back, then it was like, well, we want football back, but we want it back next season, so let's cancel this season and void. Now, obviously, those in power are trying to get football and sport back on for us while we're all locked in our homes. And now, obviously, you've got the voices of dissent who are saying, well, no, it won't be safe. There are some players coming out and saying it won't be safe. You have the usual people like your Piers Morgans of the world and whatever else saying this is ridiculous, shut it down, cancel it, finish football. So I want to address that whole thing about it and the safety side of it, because I tweeted something earlier in the week. I got a bit of stick for it. I want to address that and where I'm coming from and talking about, well, if we are going to get back to playing and if football is going to resume, what does the word safety mean and doing it safely mean, and how can we do it? These ideas of playing games abroad and everything else, just ridiculous. So again, I'm going to go into that a little bit. I'm going to be really honest with you. I'm going to be really, really truthful, and probably going to be really harsh with some of the stuff I say today. Some of you aren't going to like it. Some of you will. At times I feel like a lone wolf. I've been talking about football has to resume. I've been doing it from the beginning. I've never changed my stance. I know there's thousands of fans that agree with me. I know there's a lot of owners who agree with me. Not all of them have said it publicly. They obviously don't want to put their head above the pit and get shot down. I've done interviews. I've obviously been, various media. I did one with The Guardian the other day. I've done Talk Sport multiple times. Many others have asked me for it, and I didn't want to do too many. I did a podcast yesterday with a friend of mine in California talking about it. But I do feel like a lone wolf. There is times when you feel a bit lonely there. You're the only lonely voice. Not the voice of reason per se, but you are trying to fight your corner for your club. And I do it for the right reasons. People have thrown at me it's all financial. It's not. I love my football club. I don't want to see it disappear. I love football. I don't want to see that disappear either. I know people are throwing around the usual, well, football's not important and footballers aren't an essential service, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to go into that today as well. I'm also going to try and get my daughter to come on the podcast for a couple of minutes. She's 13. And just to talk about what it's like as a 13-year-old young girl living in lockdown and how it's affecting her life. And I've had some great emails, great messages. The viewership's up week on week. We're top 10 of the charts. It's incredible, really. I'm just doing this a little hobby in my home office while I've been locked down like the rest of you. So I really appreciate the support out there. Yes, I get a lot of flack at times. That's fine as well. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I've always said that. Do it politely, of course, otherwise I'm going to come back at you. So after the break, we'll talk about my opinion of what's going on with coronavirus in the world right now. Enjoy the show. So, coronavirus, where are we? If you follow me on Twitter, you would have seen me obviously talking about good news that our governor in Florida here, phase 1 starts on Monday. So it's like a semi-soft reopening. He didn't go as far as a lot of people wanted. People like hairdressers, small gyms, small businesses can't reopen. Some felt he was being too cautious. I probably agree with them. There are a lot of people, and I know them personally here in Orlando, that are losing their livelihoods. And there's no reason why, hairdressers with masks and the way they're doing it, you see it in other states, they can do it safely and methodically, that they can't reopen. And my wife's friend owns a small gym. It only has 5 or 6 people at a time. Again, there's no reason they couldn't have opened their business, and they're trying to get the government loans to get help, and they need help. And it's a real shame. So we're hoping with Ron that he's obviously been very cautious. We have got an older generation living in Florida. So far, we've handled it really well. He's really he's put the onus back on the citizens of Florida to be responsible and go about life responsibly, and masks and so forth. And I think we've done a pretty good job considering the millions of older generation of people that live here in Florida, particularly in the villages. When you compare us to places like New York and other areas, it really has been controlled. But obviously, we're going to wait now. I mean, I am allowed to go out on Monday and have a coffee. I'm going to meet my brother-in-law. We'll sit 6 feet apart. We'll sit in the local cafe on a terrace. And possibly next week go out with, some friends of ours, myself, my wife, and have dinner. Restaurants are allowed at 25% capacity. We've got to get back to some normality. It's time. I don't know about the rest of you, but I put out again the other day that, I've never eaten so much. I've never drank so much. I mean, I'm not an alcoholic, but by golly, what is my routine? I get up in the morning. I go out and make myself a coffee. My wife's in our home gym doing virtual workouts with Sarah, who does our Pilates with her or working out. My kids have got to be, the rule is by 9:30 sat at their desks doing their virtual schooling. I take my coffee, I go in my office, I open up my emails, I see what barrage of shit I'm getting hit with today. I read the headlines, I see what's going on, what the feeling is out there, what's the new headline, what's the new agenda, what's the new political agenda, because there's a lot of politicizing going on with this virus. And then obviously I like everyone else, certain things I do work-wise, I have a certain routine. I'll make calls, I'll speak to people, particularly the football club, I'll check how everyone is, blah. So that's a typical routine. Probably around 3:30 I'll stop. I'll go and spend an hour building Lego, because it's my 1 hour I just think about nothing else but just building Lego. It's good for my own mental health. 4:30, I insist the kids have got to be in the pool every day for an hour so they get some exercise outside. So around 4:30 they go out. 5 o'clock, my missus is finished doing, she's massively into ironing. She loves doing the old ironing. She watches all her British shows on her iPad. 5 o'clock, I'll pour her a glass of wine, I'll get a beer out, and before we know it, the kids will come in, they'll have their dinner, and I'll be 4 beers down, and my missus will be half a bottle of wine down. And we both said this morning, we got to give this a rest for a couple of days. As much as it's enjoyable, and I have to say, from a family perspective, I've never spent so much time with my family. My kid said to me the other day, I've never been home so long. Usually I'm away every 3 weeks, and I go away for 10 days. And I think I've been home now for like 10 weeks, 11 weeks in one long run. And since we've been married, I think that's the longest I've ever been home with my missus. And, we're not at the divorce stage. We're really good. And we're actually enjoying having that time together. But obviously we want to get back to some normality. I feel for my wife and my children more than anything else, forgetting about me. And my wife has her routine. She, gets up at 5:40. She gets the kids to school. She goes to the gym. She'll do her a bit of shopping. She'll come home. She'll do her things around the house. She's used to a quiet house with the dog. And just this whole coronavirus has just thrown everyone for a loop. And I can see it in their eyes. They're all desperate to get back to some semi-normality. So I said to the kids the other day, with phase 1 opening in Florida, there's a chance they'll be able to see their friends. They can invite their friends around and stay overnight. Before everyone starts screaming at me about social distancing, if you read all the reports about children this week, and you can read the scientists, and we're obviously getting stories from scientists every day, children aren't as much as a carrier of this virus as everyone is led to believe. Even in Switzerland, they're letting young children go and hug their grandparents again. So, you look around and you think, my God almighty, what are we doing to our children right now? What are we doing to our kids? So I'm at the point where I'm just like, you know what, we've done all the social distancing, we've done the lockdowns, and there are so many people that are on the cusp. They're losing their livelihoods, they've lost their jobs, they've got no money in the bank. They're coming out the other end of this wondering, how do we put food in the fridge? How do we go back to some sort of, because there is going to be a no normal life for some of these people, and some people who aren't as fortunate as others. And I've always said, this isn't about me. I could write this out for 20 months, 2 years, whatever it be. I'm fortunate I'm in that position. But I know the millions and millions of people out there, and probably a lot of them listening to this, are like, how are we going to pay our mortgage? How are we going to pay for clothes for our kids? How are we just going to live our life like we lived before this virus came along and just destroyed everything, before our governments decided to just lock us down and people just got furloughed and lost their jobs? We're now at that point where the question's got to be asked, and we've got to ask the question as a society, because I'm sick of the headlines. I'm sick of, if we reopen, there's going to be a second wave. We have to stay in lockdown. People aren't allowed out to beaches. People aren't allowed out to parks. Yet we're now told that actually sunlight actually fights against this thing. So maybe walking on beaches is not such a bad thing, unless you live in California, where the golden governor, Gav, has punished everyone and closed the beaches again this week. And you got 50 million people locked up in California. You got 2,000 deaths. You got empty hospitals, but you're not allowed out of your house. At what fucking point do we as a society look at this and go, we've done our bit. We did it as disciplined as we could. And now we've got to come out and we got to go about life. We cannot wait for a vaccine. I see people tweeting all the time. You can't go back out there. You can't go back to normal life. Not until there's a vaccine. How dare you even suggest that? I'm sorry, but I'm in the other camp now. I'm looking at places like Sweden, and I'm thinking, geez, did these guys get it right? Yeah, sure. Their rates of death and infection were not good. as opposed to everyone else. But now they're coming down. Now they're saying basically they won't have a second wave. They haven't lost their businesses. They haven't had millions of people unemployed. They haven't had kids out of school. They haven't lost all the normal things we cherish in life. And you now look at it and go, so what happens when we come out of this? What happens if there is a second wave, according to the know-it-alls, the scientists and the experts? Are we meant to just go into lockdown again? If you suddenly go back around your way of life for the next 2 months and you get back to work and you get your job and you start paying your bills again, are we meant to just throw it all out the fucking window again? The minute the news headlines blow up about it, because you know what the news are like, you know what the press is like. And I have to be honest with you, never been a massive fan anyway, but I have to say they've been some of the reports, some of the shit that's been posted, some of the negativity that they enjoy putting headlines out there about just does my nut in. You know, you watch TV, you read news headlines. It's like they don't like pushing good news. They only like shite news. They only like negative headlines. The second wave, the deaths, the mortality rate, the stay at home, lock yourself in. These are all the people deemed essential services that can go about doing TV shows and writing news articles and still go about their business, still pick up their paychecks, still pay their bills. It really, really hasn't affected a lot of them. And that really frustrates the living shit out of me when I see some of the stuff that's spread out there. And you might call it propaganda. You know, I've got my own eyes, my own ears, and I've got my own opinions. And I know right now I'm at the stage where I'm like, I need some sort of life back. And I understand people have died. And I understand the virus hasn't been good. And I understand it's gone after the most vulnerable. And I get that. But I also have to say, and we have to look at this, what's going to be the long-term effect on this? Not only that, you're going to see the suicide spike. You're going to see drug addiction spike. You're going to see poverty spike. Let me tell you right now, if we continue down this road, if we keep extending lockdowns, if we keep locked up, if our liberties are at that stage where we're like in Spain, your children aren't allowed out of the house for 6 weeks, you've no idea this is going to affect people in 6 to 12 months' time, because that effect is all going to come later. Mightn't happen now, but down the road, we're going to see it. So who's with me? Because right now, the way I feel, and I said this to my wife the other day, if Florida continued a lockdown for another 2 months, I'd move to Texas. Texas is open. Georgia's open. And I know you're saying there, well, that's irresponsible and that's crazy and that's mad because you're reading news headlines. And the Georgia governor's come out and he's opened the state. Texas has done the same. And the minute there's a mini spike or there's a higher infection rate, there's a more testing, of course, the news headlines are, you know, Republican governors putting lives at risk and people's lives. I'm sorry, I'm at the stage where for the benefit of my children and their education, if we in Florida turn around and said, come August, the schools are still shut, my kids can't go back to school, I'm looking to move. I'm looking to do the right thing for my children. This doesn't affect children like it does the older generation. We shouldn't be destroying their education. We shouldn't be doing what we're doing to children at the moment. It's not right. And I'd be the type of person who would go, you know what? I can't live here anymore. I've got to go find a place, even if it were Sweden. I've got to find a place where I can bring up my children into some sort of a normality, some sort of normal life where they can go to school every day and they can see school friends and they can do the things young kids are meant to do. Because, and I know I have people scream at me on Twitter that there are these headlines about how it affects children and this, that, whatever else. But you know what? Let's be really realistic about this. How many out of all the deaths around the world from coronavirus has happened in young children? Let's look at the real data. And I'm going to get on to data after the break. But data is really important to me. I don't go by news headlines. I go by data. Government data, whatever data it is. And even some people are saying that's scared and, you know, they're putting up the death rates in coronavirus over here. They're deeming everyone who dies from, you know, even the flu at the moment or something else, they're putting down as a coronavirus death. So, but we'll get into the data in a minute. What I'm trying to say in this podcast is I'm at the point where I choose to live life. I choose to walk out my door knowing there's a risk. And I have asthma. I'm 44. I'm not quite obese, but I'm definitely overweight. I know there's a risk. I spoke to my pal in California yesterday. Great guy. And he's got a medical underlying condition, so he'd be in that high risk bracket. And he's my age. And he said to me, Dara, I've got a month's rent left. My businesses have already gone down the toilet. I've got kids to feed. I've got my wife to feed. I have to get out and work. And he said, I'm done. I said, I'm now looking at if this carries on in California, I've got to move. I'm done with this. I can't live like this anymore. And I understood where he was coming from. And I'm fortunate to be in a position where I can pay my bills and I don't have to worry about feeding my children. But this is a normal life of a normal person who is now at the point they've been pushed to the brink. They've locked down in a disciplined way for over 45, 50 days. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel because some people choose not to lay out steps to give us any hope. The one thing I said about our president was he did a press conference, he laid out phases and he gave us hope. He then put it upon our governors to start the reopening process with phases. We've done it in Florida, phase 1 on Monday. We'll be in phase 2 in 2 weeks. But lots of other states, particularly the blue states, have decided not to do that. They've extended their lockdowns. The guy in California, he keeps talking about it, 50 million people, 2,000 deaths, but he's not giving people actual hope. He said the other day he was going to have meetings to discuss a reopening phase. Well, I'm sorry, you should already have had those meetings. Give your citizens some hope, because right now you're just breaking the spirit of millions of people. And it's just not fair and it's not right. You have to give us the responsibility to live as responsibly as we can and to do the right thing. We all know that when we come out of this, we're going to have to wear masks. We all know we're going to have to social distance. We all know our hygiene's got to be greater than ever. We all know there's going to be a period of time where we can't be in crowds. We know this. If we'd known before it all happened, before the lockdowns, it could have been a different outcome. But we're past that point now. But you can't tell us now that we've got to lock up for the next month, 2 months, 3 months. We can't live like that anymore, nor should we live like that anymore. So I'm in that camp of now, enough's enough. We need to be given that responsibility to go out, take on the risk, knowing full well there is a risk and you get the virus. Yes, you could be hospitalized. Yes, there could be mortality. Yes, that is a risk we have to take. And when we start looking at the data, is that really a massive risk? And again, I know what I'm saying is probably controversial. I know it's going to upset some people, but I'm at that point. And I have my own opinion. I've got to live my life my way. And that's the way I feel about coronavirus and what the world's doing with it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the UK. I know your lockdown's meant to expire, I think, on the 7th of May. If the government come out and say that you've got to stay locked up for another 3 weeks, it will be interesting to see if people's patience is bust, if it's at the limit, and what the general feeling is. What's astonished me, and this has really made me look into the data, was the amount of young people that were coming at me on Twitter about wanting to stay home, wanting to stay in lockdown, wanting not to go back to society, worried that they were going to die from coronavirus. Personally, I don't quite get that. And when we go into the data after the break, we'll address those fears and some of those people that have come at me. But I'll say this, is this down to they don't own businesses, they don't employ lots of people, are they on unemployment, are they getting paid more to stay at home? I don't know. I don't know the way young people's minds work, but I know if I were young and I was a hard worker and a grafter, I'd want to get back to work and I'd want to do it responsibly, but I certainly wouldn't want to stay locked at home. So here's the thing. If the lockdowns are lifted and we have to go about life, for those of you who don't want to leave your homes, don't leave your homes. You have a choice. Right now, unfortunately, there is no choice, and that's not right either. So after the break, I'm going to talk a bit about data and some of the controversy I stirred up on Twitter. So, welcome back. I've just actually returned from Quest Diagnostics. It's a testing center. So we got sent this thing, and you could go test for the antibody test, which isn't a test to say if you've got coronavirus. It's a test to see if you've already had coronavirus and you have the antibodies in your system, which by all scientific data points to the chance of reinfection from coronavirus would be slim. That's when they were talking about having these digital passports for people who've already had it. You can't live life like that. And I certainly wouldn't promote life like that where we're all judged on passports of having it or not having it. But it was interesting all the same. I paid online, paid $100. I went in, gloves, mask. I was in there within 2 minutes. They took my blood. They gave me the results in 2 days. There was no big queues. Everyone was done in an orderly manner. There was lots of social distancing. The funny thing was the nurse who took my blood, if you could put her on tape about what she thinks about coronavirus, she thinks it's all politicized. She thinks it's been way overblown. It's ruining our country. She thinks it's all about politics. Her words were, "This is no worse than the flu." Of course, I'm not saying it's no worse than the flu. I'm not in that camp. We all know this is worse than the flu. But when all is said and done, when the testing comes out and everything else, I presume the mortality rates won't be as bad as people first thought. But her point was anyway that it's all overblown, and her life has been pretty much, and a lot of her colleagues' lives as well, have been put on furlough and part-time work. And she's in the medical field. She says she sees it, and it's all being politicized. So it was just an interesting point to get going into a place like that to get tested. And I'll let you know in a couple of days what the results were. It wasn't a test to see if I've got it right now. It was just that antibody test to see if it was in my system or whatever else. So I've obviously traveled from the UK. I've traveled from Dubai before it was all blowing up. So there was every chance myself, my wife had it. We both went and we got the test. So it was an easy test. I know everyone's obsessed with testing, particularly in the UK, and it's come up with football. To be really honest with you, it's really, really easy to get access to a test here in the US. I know now they're doing free testing everywhere. I know we're up to about 300, 400,000 tests a day. And we've tested more than anywhere else in the millions, even though some will argue about the per capita numbers and whatever else. But again, if testing is the way forward, I don't see why that's a big issue. Every country should have their act together, and let's just get the testing done. Not that for me it makes much difference, because if I get tested and today I don't have it, but tomorrow I touch a petrol pump and I do get it, what am I meant to do? Go get tested every 4 days? So I think at some stage, again, common sense has to prevail. But yeah, I just thought I'd bring you up to date on that, on the testing process. I thought I was going in to get a prick in my finger, and she emptied half my blood out of my arm. So it was quite different from what I expected. So let's talk about this week on Twitter. People were talking about, well, you can't play football. It's too dangerous. It's not safe. So I put out a simple tweet because I am a data freak. And I just said, look, can somebody tell me the data for how many 17-year-olds to 35-year-olds have died from coronavirus? It was a genuine question. I wanted to know. I wasn't trying to be a smart arse. I wasn't trying to be controversial. It was a genuine question on data. And obviously, a lot of people came back and were like, yeah, we see what you're saying. We agree. This affects an older generation. It does affect younger people with underlying health conditions. Yep, we get that. And then the usual people came, the ghouls. You're a disgrace. You're a football club chairman. How could you say that on Twitter? How irresponsible. But not one of them could give me the answer I was asking. Not one of them could show me the headlines. I genuinely wanted to know. We're talking about footballers are athletes. They're well-oiled machines. They are the healthiest of the healthiest. And I just wanted to know, what is the current mortality rate for people in sports, the age 17 to 35, because that's kind of the age group that will be playing football, with no underlying conditions, but they are playing sports and they are obviously medically checked all the time, particularly with heart conditions and everything else. I wanted to know how many footballers or how many people in our sport had died from coronavirus, because it's worth asking the question. Everyone's giving the argument now and coming out with it's not safe. Simon Jordan said something ridiculous like you could be done for manslaughter if a player dies from coronavirus. That's not going to work. If you're going to lift lockdowns, you expect people to go back to work. If you're going to allow for employers to be sued because somebody said they caught coronavirus at work, or they got hospitalized, or worst case scenario, somebody died, well, then nobody's going to open a business again. Nobody's going to go back to work, and sport's no different. So that's just a ridiculous point to make. And I have a lot of respect for Simon. Some of the stuff he says is very intelligent, but that one I didn't find, it wasn't the right thing to say. So again, I put it out there and nobody answered me. I got slaughtered by a few people. So I decided myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to look at the data. And I thought I'd pick New York City. It's the epicenter for the pandemic here in America. It's been hit worse than anywhere else. You could argue the governor and the people who run New York haven't exactly prepared very well for a pandemic, seeing it's like one of the densest cities in the world. It's been under attack from terrorism in the past. It's probably target number one for a lot of terrorist attacks. So it was amazing a city like that wasn't prepped with PPE equipment and wasn't prepped with ventilators. But they've handled it best they can. Too many people have died in New York. The real scandal's coming out now about the care homes and the old people's facilities where, so much mortality is coming out of those areas and they haven't been protected like they should have, like we did here in Florida. So I thought I'm going to pull up the stats. And I found a website, government statistic website, and I posted some of the stuff yesterday. Would you believe, obviously, well over 20,000 people have died, and that's New York City. But would you believe in the ages 0 to 17, there was no mortality in New York City from the coronavirus? In the age of 17 to 44 or 45, I want to say, and you can check my tweet the other day and go to the government website. It gives you daily updated statistics. I want to say the mortality rate in the age from 17 to 40 odd years old was 0.014%. I'll repeat, 0.014%, which means somebody with coronavirus has a 99.9% chance of survival. So I'm asking you seriously as adults out there, what are the risks when you walk out your front door every day of mortality? What are the risks of going about your normal life in a certain age group? If you knew those statistics and you were in that age and you were a fairly healthy person in that age group, let's say you were an athlete and you were told there was a 99.9% chance that you were going to survive from catching a virus that's obviously wiped out so many of our older generation, what would your answer be to that? And I just wanted to bring some context to the conversation as I was getting slaughtered. So I'm not trying to say I want us to be reckless and dangerous and play football and do it in a reckless way and without the right government oversight and without the right government advice and take the right measures that we need to take. But what I wanted to say is, can we stop the argument that footballers are going to die from coronavirus when we get back to playing? Because the reality is, if we get back to playing, and yes, we're going to have to do testing, and yes, we're going to have to be hygienic, and yes, possibly have to wear masks. What's the real percentage chance of a footballer dying from coronavirus? Is that a reason not to go back to playing football? Because that argument I'm hearing now, the footballers now worried for their health. I understand that. Everyone's worried if they got coronavirus, how it would affect them. But the reality is that for somebody working in a supermarket, for somebody working in the healthcare services, for somebody working on a building site, for somebody going out and working in an office as an accountant or a lawyer, there's going to be a risk. There's going to be a percentage risk. And we're going to have to make that decision sooner rather than later when we come out of lockdowns. Forget about going back in the second waves. Is the risk worth taking? Is the risk worth living? Are we going to put one foot in front of the other and go back to some sort of normal society as best we can? Or are we going to stay indoors when you're in the age group where you have a 99.9% chance of survival from this virus? That's the question I was trying to ask, and that's what I was trying to put out there. So when all the headlines were up there about manslaughter and about footballers possibly dying and feeling it wasn't safe to play, I just want to throw out the other side of that argument, because you're going to have to flip this for me. This whole thing, somebody said it today, I think I'm a football club owner. We've got to lock down. We've got to make sure there's no second wave. We've got to do things right until there's a vaccine out. Listen, I'd love if there was a vaccine. That's great. And they're saying they're going to rush one through. There ain't going to be a vaccine tomorrow. There ain't going to be a vaccine in a month. There ain't going to be a vaccine in 3 months. And let's not forget they say that the flu vaccine has only got a 55% success rate. So here's the harsh reality. Are we really, as a society, and this includes football, are we going to stop working? Are footballers going to say there's too much of a risk of dying from coronavirus if we go back to playing football? Because if that's going to be the argument from footballers, I'm going to give you the flip side to that argument. And I would say, if we are seriously considering no more football until there's a vaccine, no more football until 2021 or longer down the line, does that mean, as football clubs and people who own football clubs and run football clubs, does that mean we can have a pause on all overheads? Does that mean we can stop paying people? Because how can I be expected to pay somebody to perform a task for me if they're refusing to do it, or if they're saying it's unsafe for them to do it? So I'm going to have to go the other way of that and go, well, if I can't, as a company, perform our duties every day, if I can't provide a service, if I can't go out and do what we're meant to do, how can I pay the people who are employed by me to do so if they're refusing or they don't want to do it? So that's the crossroads we're going to come to. And unfortunately, footballers, you can't have it both ways. Not so long ago, we were talking about pay deferrals. We were talking about pay cuts. We were talking about understanding clubs' plights. If footballers are now going to take the line that it's too unsafe to play football, we can't possibly do it until there's a vaccine, well, then we're going to have to take the line. We shouldn't have to pay them. And I know that sounds harsh and I know it sounds heartless, but that's reality. Ask yourself the question right now, sitting there. If you owned a business and you were told lockdown's lifted and you're going back to work, but the people who work for you refused to do the work because they felt there was a risk of death from coronavirus, what are you meant to do? Are you meant to continue paying them? Would you continue to pay them? Is that a fair process? Is that a fair outcome? Those questions need to be answered. Now, I saw today the Premier League are still going ahead with their plans to restart up and finish the season. And I think that's brilliant. I know the EFL are fighting. I know all the crap that's come out this week about leaked audio tapes and stuff like that. We've heard nothing different from the EFL. We had a thing today. Plans are still in place. Hopefully training starts on the 16th of May. And we're going to try and take governmental advice on how we can start playing again, whether it's behind closed doors or whatever it is. Because eventually we're going to have to get to the stage where if you're telling me sports can't come back and crowds can't come back again, that's going to be a big decision society, governments are going to have to take. Can we possibly live like that for the next 12 months? Because I don't think we can. And again, that's going to have to be, do we do things in a safe environment? And we do have crowds back wearing masks. People are going to have to be looked after and most vulnerable. Or are we going to have to take that risk? Are we going to have to go down the route? Will we go down the route Sweden's gone down? So they're all the questions that need answered. I know what camp I'm in. I'm still in the camp that football needs to resume. Yes, the agenda nonsense that goes on every day, it breaks my spirit at times. I feel like a lone wolf. I feel like at times waving the white flag and going, you know what? Fine. Void your season. Cancel football. Let's not have any football. We'll hibernate our football club. We'll stop paying all our players. We'll stop paying all our bills and wake us up when we're allowed going back to open up our football club again. Because you do get to that point, where you're like, why do I bother? And you do get to that point where you're saying, why do I bother? When you are that lone voice at times. So it can be frustrating, but I'm still fighting the good fight. I'll still continue to be a mouthpiece for it. I'll still continue to believe the data. I'll still believe that it is more than it is a risk to play football with coronavirus. Of course it is a risk of you're going to get infected. I don't believe the risk of death is as big as people are leading people to believe in the news headlines. I think we can get football back on. I think as this thing is burning out through the summer, there's no reason we can't give our fans some hope. We can't give them some joy. There's thousands and thousands of football fans up and down the country, if not millions. Yes, we've seen France cancel the league and Holland cancel the league. That's their own prerogative. Spain haven't done it. Italy haven't done it. They're two of the hardest hit areas. We have to have a plan here, guys. Why can't we think positively? Why can't we try and get back to playing some sort of sport? Why can't we give everyone a lift? For those owners still out there piping on about we're not playing without fans, I've said it before, that's great. If the EFL tell me we're playing, we're playing. Okay, we're part of the EFL. We'll follow due process. If the EFL come out and tell us we're not playing, we'll abide by that as well. But we're going to need a good reason for voiding and cancellation. I still stand firmly behind that. I go as far as to say, if they void and cancel, and they cancel football for a prolonged period of time, I'll probably ring my partners up and say, buy me out. I'm done. I'll need a break from football mentally for a couple of years. Because I've put my life into this for 15 years. I love the industry. I love the game. I love the sport. It's never been about money. People accuse me all the time saying it's about money. I've never made money from owning a football club. I never will make money from owning a football club. I don't do it for money. I do it because it's just something I'm passionate about, something I love. So if that's taken away from me, I'll sell it to my partners and they can take over the football club and I'll take a 2-year hiatus and get my love for the game back in again, because I'm at that point now. I'm trying to fight the good fight. I do believe that we need changes to football. I do believe this virus, this pandemic will allow us to change our game and make things better, make things more workable for smaller football clubs and get our wages in line. I've gone through it in episode 3, 4, and 5, what I think we should do as an EFL to make those changes. But I tell you right now, if they just take it all away from me and the thousands of fans out there and they just go, we're done, and there is no sport and there is no football till next year, that's just something I can't live with and abide by. And I feel really, really strongly about that. And I'm sorry if that upsets people. So that's where I feel about it all. I've talked about data. I've talked about what I think we need to do with football. And there's no reason we can't resume the game in a safe and cautious manner and take the right advice. There's no reason we can't do that in June. There's no reason our players can't go back to training in a couple of weeks when lockdown's lifted. Because again, I've said it, I'll keep saying it. If everyone else is allowed back to work after the 7th of May in a cautious and safe way, why can't we? People say to me, well, footballers spit, and if they're wearing masks, are they catching coronavirus from each other? We're talking about fifth athletes here. We're talking about people who are probably going to test. I know the argument is, well, you can't do all the testing when the healthcare workers aren't getting tested. I agree with you. And we're not saying we're going to start. The UK's got to get their testing act together. There's no doubt about that. The testing over here in America is quick. It's unbelievable. There's no reason they can't replicate that across the UK. If testing is really the answer, well, that's fine. Let's test. If we have to test our players twice a week or once a week or whatever it is, that's what we'll do as well. I don't see the insurmountable roadblocks other people are putting out there. I don't buy into the argument either. Well, there's too much death going on, so we should just stop talking about football. We should just cancel. We should just void. We should just do this. No, I'm sorry. I'm not a white flag waver. I'll never be that person. Okay, I'll fight to the bitter end on this. And like I said in my earlier segment, I choose to live life differently. I can't live in fear. I choose to live in hope. If you don't agree with me, that's your prerogative. But I hope more and more people agree with me. I've yet to meet anyone I know who doesn't agree with what I'm saying about lockdowns and about us having to live life and about living life with a certain amount of risk. Because if you're waiting for a vaccine or magic therapy, you're going to be waiting a hell of a long time. And we can't, as a society, go through that and just stay locked up while everyone loses their homes and their jobs, their livelihoods, their life savings. It's just not going to work, guys. So I'll be back after the break and we'll take it down a notch tone-wise, because we've spoken a lot about coronavirus. We've spoken a lot about football. I'm going to talk after the break just about family life and a couple of other bits and pieces. Thank you. Welcome back. I love my kids. I do anything for my kids. And the effect of this coronavirus, the lockdown, the cancelling of schools, has really, really troubled me when it comes to my kids. My son is excelling. He's getting A's in all his subjects. He's in the final quarter of his term before he goes into high school. And he's loving this life because he's a bit like that. He's a bit like me. He's a bit of an anti-socialite. So he's not big on going out and socialising, or he doesn't really care. He enjoys going to school, but he could live without it. So he's quite happy. I said to him the other day, joking, when we had our phase 1 announced, I said, "You're going back to school next week?" Well, his face, fuck me. He didn't look happy. But he's really, really, coming into his own. His grades are up. He's doing really, really good. And that's brilliant. But then I got my 2 girls. I got my 13-year-old Darcy and I got my 11-year-old Cara. And I know they're struggling with this. Darcy's a straight A student. And this quarter, she's down. Her grades are C's and B's. She even had a D today in one thing. And I know she's hating this because she is a social bunny. And she's missing her friends. And this is affecting her. And I hate seeing that. And I hate the fact that school life's been taken away from her. And through no choice of her own. For a virus that really doesn't affect her age group. She should be at school. My youngest daughter, Cara, again, I know she's devastated. She misses her friends. She loves school. It's just a social life for her. And again, she was graduating this year and she was going into middle school. And I can see the disappointment in her face as well. And that upsets me every day. I see that in their faces and I try and we watch movies and they're swimming and they do all the things. But I just know that this is affecting them badly. And I can't allow that to happen. And I said it earlier on. I am that parent that if come the end of the summer, schools aren't open here in America, I'll find somewhere in the world they are, and I'll move my family. If Dubai opens up schools and they've done things and they're ready to rock and roll and kids are going back to school in September, I'll move my family to Dubai. Because I'm not going to put my kids through this any longer than they have to, nor should they have to. And they're in an age group where unless they have serious underlying conditions, children are okay with coronavirus. So, they should be back in school and they should be finishing their school year. And we should be doing it as best we can and do it in a cautious way. And again, make sure older teachers maybe keep them furloughed, make sure there's nobody that's seriously going to, get affected. But there's no way we should be doing this to our kids. I don't know how many other parents out there agree with me, but it does break my heart seeing my kids in this kind of state of mind. Well, 2 of them anyway. So what I'm going to do now is there is no more school this term. The end of this month, they finished the school term, the end of May. They're obviously doing the virtual work from home. We were planning to go to Dubai for a holiday in June. That's probably not going to happen with all the lockdown. So I'm going to figure out, wherever's open in America, I'm going to take them and we'll go on some sort of not a road trip, but I want to change the scenery. I want to get them out of the house. I want to go rent a house on a beach somewhere and spend a few weeks there doing that, change it up because it needs to be changed up. We're just engulfed with this coronavirus stuff. I want to give them a normal type of June as possible as I can. That's something I'm really, really focused on. And as next week and the next couple of weeks, lockdowns start getting lifted and hopefully more things open, I can start making those plans because I have to make those plans. I'm fortunate I'm in a position to make those plans for my kids. So this week we watched Sonic. That was really funny. I thought Jim Carrey was brilliant. Me and the missus watched Extraction on Netflix. Anyone likes a good action movie with Chris Hemsworth? Absolutely fantastic. We are absolutely in bits because we finished Bosch. We're running out of stuff to watch. And a couple of our shows now are coming up to their season end. And we're at that stage of night now, we're going, shit. She's even got me watching Housewives of Beverly Hills, Housewives of New York. I'll let you in a little secret. I've watched them all along and I've enjoyed them. My favorite show in the world is back on this Sunday, Billions. Anyone who's never seen it, watch it. Bobby Axe. It's one of the best TV series you're going to watch. That's back this Sunday, so I'm really, really looking forward to that. Movie night tomorrow night. I'm not sure what we're going to watch. I'm toying with a few ideas. I'm toying with maybe Field of Dreams. I've got a couple of other ones up my sleeve as well, so I'm going to put it to the family vote. My missus has suggested next week we do some sort of game night with my sister and her kids and her husband. Live a few miles away. So we were thinking about doing a virtual game night where we play Trivial Pursuit and then ping in my dad as well and ping in some other friends and do it on Zoom. And I'll be the adjudicator. So that should be quite interesting. I'll let you know how that all goes. I'll be back after the break and I'll wrap this up. And I will say to everyone out there, stick with it, stay strong, For those of you right now who are struggling mentally, hit me up, email me. Happy to talk. I'll call you. We'll Zoom. I know what this is doing to people. I know I've got usually the strongest mind, and I know I'm not sleeping until 2 a.m. I know my mind's busy all the time, so I can only imagine what this is doing to people out there, and it's awful. But I will say to you, we're getting to that stage. We're about to break through. We've got to break through. Hang on in there a little bit longer, okay? Be back after the break. Welcome back. So we're joined by my 13-year-old daughter, Darcy McAnthony, or as I like to call her, a boobity. And I just cut her up there. She'd been dyeing her hair. I don't know what the hell's going on with her hairstyle at the moment. She's like a peroxide blonde. So we've been talking in the podcast, Boo, and we've been talking about coronavirus and the effects on life. And I was saying that some people excel, some people are doing really well. And I said, you're a straight A student and you're struggling at the moment with your grades. And obviously, tell us why. What's going on?
I think personally with this whole crisis that we're being in, I've slacked off and I haven't been giving it the best effort that I should, just because we're at home doesn't mean I should just kind of not give everything 100% right now.
Okay. So you just feel a bit like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I'm not feeling very motivated right now.
Okay.
I get very distracted that easily.
You get distracted easily? Yeah. And you just like dying to get out of the house, see your friends?
Yeah. And also going back to school, because I think my mindset is being just in a classroom with the teacher with you is a lot better than just sitting at home.
The whole Zoom homeschooling thing's driving you mad. And what are your teachers saying to you?
I mean, they're not really concerned about the grades. They're more concerned about everyone's like how they're doing and
mental
stuff.
Health.
I've had a few Zoom calls from them about it, like asking how I am.
Mm-hmm.
They all like my new hair, so But yeah, they said that it wouldn't really matter. They said that they were fine to whenever I needed help or if I needed later days to turn things in, because they've been really relaxed on this whole.
Okay. Well, we'll get you back to school in September, don't worry. In August, September. What else are you missing? You're obviously a big volleyball player. You love your sport. Yes. For those of you who don't know, my daughter's like 5'9", and she's been like that since she was like 11. So she obviously gets a height after me, but she's a good volleyball player. And she's been doing her workout sessions and that. And she usually plays 2-3 games a week, has 2 training sessions. So you're missing that too, right?
Yeah.
Your whole volleyball gang.
So hopefully going back on the court won't be as tough as it is like after just a few months of not stepping on a court. So
you get back to volleyball, don't worry. Are you worried about anything?
I mean, kind of.
What are you worried about?
Lots of stuff like how I'm worried about about how school's going to end, about how they're going to do lots of the different stuff that we were looking forward to this whole year that they aren't doing. Also kind of worried that they are going to pick up the season, like volleyball season right after, and I don't really want to go back during my summer vacation.
During your summer vacation? Yeah, I mean, you've missed a school trip. You were due to go where the Florida Keys. You've obviously missed your volleyball tournaments. You're missing your friends. You haven't seen your friends for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
You've been kind of housebound, bar swimming every day. Was it been forcing you guys to swim?
Yeah.
What's the first thing you'll do when you're allowed out of lockdown?
I don't think it'd be see my friends. I think it'd literally just be either go to just the gym down the street and work out. Just having that feeling of getting out of the house.
Getting out of the house.
Because I'm not that worried about going anywhere. I'm just worried about just not just staying in our house the whole few weeks.
Okay.
I think what I'd probably do once we got out of quarantine is either hit Starbucks a good few times or maybe go to the mall.
Go to the mall?
I think I need some new summer clothes.
You need some new summer clothes? Yeah, okay. Very good. The old daddy's credit card will take a hammering. I hear you. Well, it's good to have you. Anything else you want to add to the audience out there?
Guess just stay safe and
Fair enough. Love you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yay.
So there you go. We heard from my 13-year-old. It's interesting always to get kids' perspective. I know she's suffering, more than, possibly my son is suffering. I know my youngest is the same. And it gets to me. And as a parent, I want my kids to have everything in life and I want them to be successful. I hate seeing it like this. So for me, like I said earlier on in the podcast, if it means I have to move from Florida or move somewhere, wherever it might be, wherever's open, wherever has schooling, I'm going to do it for my kids. I have to. And people will say, but there's a risk. Yeah, there is a risk. Fucking life is full of risks. I've taken risks all my life. It's who I am. It's what I am. It's what's put me in the place I am. And for those who choose not to take risks, who want to stay home, that's your choice. I won't have a go at you. I don't agree with you. I think the mindset always has to be live life to the full. And, I'm at that stage now where I am just that person. So for the rest of you out there, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me at realdarrenmcanty@gmail.com. I've had some great suggestions for the podcast. I will follow up on them. Let me know your thoughts on this. Leave reviews on the various sites if you can. God bless you all. Have a lovely weekend. Love to all you and your families. And remember, don't drink so much. Don't eat so much. But hang in there. We're getting there. Things are going to change. They're going to change very soon. And I know the human spirit's strong. And forget about we're all in this together, because we're not. We're individual. Everyone has their own issues. But I know one thing's for sure. What's going to happen is life will resume. And yes, there's going to be a risk involved to it. We're going to put our best foot forward. And that's the best way we can get through this. So take care. Until next time. Signing out.